Greetings YouTube, it's your buddy Troy here. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about some mindful fat loss questions that we can ask ourselves at any point on our fat loss journey, whether we're a beginner or whether we're someone that just wants to join in the conversation. If that's you, I'd love to hear what's going well for you in the comments. If you're new to the channel, I'm a former fat guy. I decided to start a YouTube channel to share my story. And not only that, but share other people's stories, success stories around weight loss and getting in shape and toning up a little bit. There's so many people who have, shared their story in the comments, and I feel like every time someone does that, it helps someone else. So I feel like it's worth it. And if you're new to the channel, I ask that you smash that subscribe button because it really means a lot to me and it's free for you. So let's talk about it. Fat loss questions. These are questions that we can ask ourselves, right? But let's just maybe have a conversation around certain questions, starting with nutrition. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. What percentage in terms of success on a person's fitness journey, what percentage would you say that you attribute to nutrition? I would attribute it to a very high percentage, maybe like 80%, right? And so if we really bring our attention to our nutrition, what we're eating, usually there are some answers there. Usually there's some low-hanging fruit. And small adjustments in that area pay off huge dividends over time. And what you don't want to do, guys, is you don't want to try to out-exercise a bad diet. You'll never do that. Make some adjustments in your diet because that's the easy way. So it's all about, for me, doing it the easy way as opposed to fighting against your body, right? Working out really hard in the gym with a personal trainer all the time, killing yourself, yet never fixing maybe some small little things that you're doing wrong in your diet that you'll never make any progress unless you just kind of remove those obstacles, if you will. So examine that. It's a question to ask yourself. How's my diet? What am I eating? When am I eating? Right? Why am I eating? Emotional eating can sabotage the best of us, right? So yeah, guys, something to think about. Next, how are you hydrating? Are you drinking your calories? If you're drinking, some of our favorite soft drinks, which I love, they're delicious, and oh my gosh, they are not fresh, clean, plain water, which is what I would recommend. If you have access to that, you're very fortunate. We're blessed to have it. Take advantage of it. Drink lots of it. Helps with hunger. Helps your body, helps a lot if you're not doing that, if you're drinking a bunch of fruit juice and sodas, and if you're drinking your calories. Hey, coffee is great, I love it, but when it gets loaded up with various creamers, a whole bunch of sugar, at some point it becomes a meal. It starts to being like almost having like a candy bar every time you're drinking a cup of coffee. So I'm not a doctor, but I imagine it has some type of impact, which might not be supportive of your goals. So consider, how are you hydrating? Next, how are your energy levels? How are you feeling? I feel like energy is the currency of life. We only have so much energy, and when we are able to choose what we spend that on, then that feels good. It doesn't feel good when we don't have the energy to be able to do the things that we want to do. Sometimes we're in situations where we have the time, we could do it, but we don't have the energy, right? So that is some serious currency in our lives. So it's worth asking the question, is my routine or whatever it is that I'm doing, is it supportive of my energy levels? And sometimes there's things there that we can adjust in terms of how we're eating, how we're sleeping perhaps, but various things, right? So just being in touch with that, asking that question of ourselves. I would ask you, right? If I cared about you and I was checking in with you in terms of your health, I'd say, hey, how are your energy levels? It's worth having that conversation. Next, how are you sleeping? I feel like the importance of sleep is sometimes overlooked, but it's worth maybe examining, how are you sleeping? How important is it for you in terms of those energy levels and your overall sense of well-being? Because what I notice is that when I am not getting enough sleep, there's a cumulative and negative effect on my overall quality of life. So I would ask maybe we can ask ourselves, like, how am I sleeping? Are there any ways that maybe I could make some adjustments there around that? Next, are you moving your body? If you haven't been living under a rock, and maybe you have, and that's okay, welcome. But perhaps you've heard of exercise as medicine almost, right? It has some type of benefit. Doing it is somehow good for you. Now, what that looks like, in my opinion, is basically whatever feels good to a person, and we're all different. So some people might like to go for a walk. Everyone would probably benefit from walking more, right? But other people like to play tennis. Other people do badminton or, soccer. The point I'm trying to make is that, are you moving your body? Examine that, because many of us spend a lot of time sitting in a chair, right? Looking at a computer all day. I've heard that sitting is the new smoking. And I notice myself sitting a lot. And so we have to wonder, like, what's that doing to us? Maybe it's not great. And so, like, how can we counteract that, some of those effects there, and by moving our body? I find some type of strength exercise, some type of resistance exercise. You don't have to go to the gym, and unless that's what you like. But maybe just a couple push-ups at home, or maybe, get some light dumbbells and do some sort of exercise that feels good for you. And I don't think that you need to do much more than that. As long as you ask yourself, like, hey, what does it look like overall? What am I doing? Am I sitting all day long at the office and then going home and sitting at the TV? Because if I ask myself that question and the answer is yes, then I have to be like, oh, you need to move, and then I can go for a walk, right? There's ways to remedy. But I don't think we want to keep doing that one thing over and over and over. So that's the conversation. Next. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about this one, guys. And I feel like everything in moderation, right? But the question that we're asking ourselves next is around sunlight and nature connection. So I feel like it's important to be able to, when you don't see the sun, when you're in a windowless room and you can't tell if it's light or dark outside, there's something about that that's very disorienting. And like I said, I'm not a doctor, but do your own research on circadian rhythms and how being exposed to sunlight, particularly in the morning when you're waking up, and then not being exposed to the artificial lighting as we're supposed to be winding down. But those sort of rhythms should be in tune with nature, what we've evolved with over time. So it's worth considering. On the other side of that, like I said, is the nature connection itself. Maybe even just standing in some grass in your bare feet, going for just a contemplative walk. It's not a hike where it's strenuous or anything, but just kind of meandering through nature, using your senses to just kind of be present in the moment. I find that I often am struggling with living in the past or worrying about the present, and it's very unhelpful. And one way to sort of break that loop is to employ mindfulness, right? The channel Mindfully Fit. And a way to incorporate that, or really sort of just kind of practice it, for me, is going out into nature. So the invitation is to explore that in a way that feels right for you. Next, purpose and joy. Now, we're all different, right? We're bio-individual, we're similar, but we're not all the same. So this is going to be different for everyone. But I've heard, and I do feel, that when people have something that makes them feel plugged in, something that they're passionate about, a reason, to get up out of bed in the morning that they feel good about. They feel like they're contributing. They feel like they're somehow a positive force in, the world. But anyways, it's important that people have that purpose. And without it, I feel like people really suffer. So it's just worth examining in our lives. And you may have heard this referred to before as like, what's your why? But like when you're trying to make changes, let's say you're trying to lose some weight, lose some body fat, you need to have a powerful why behind that, because when you make certain changes, you feel a little what we could call resistance. It might feel a little uncomfortable. It will, expect that. And when you have a why, it helps you power through that stuff. It helps you hang in there and not quit. And so I feel like maybe it's helpful in terms of life to have that. So like I said, what that looks like will look a little bit different for everyone. I feel a little, uncomfortable even like sharing it, right? Because it's so deep and personal, but perhaps important and worth having that conversation about, even if it's just an inner conversation. So finally, the last question that we can ask ourselves is, it's around supplements. So like, what types of supplements are we taking? And you should always consult with your doctor. You should always be getting blood work. You should never be just like taking things, too much or whatever, and not researching. But really, so that's one thing to look at, right? If you're doing that, if you're not seeing your doctor, if you're not getting blood work, if you're taking a whole bunch of stuff that you don't know what it is, then it would make sense to look at that for a moment and maybe pause. But if you're noticing that maybe like, hey, I wonder about protein powder, right? Maybe you've never tried that before, and it's been my experience that something like that might be helpful. Protein can be hard to get sometimes, right? You don't always have access to meat or whatever, or the time or space or the things to be able to prepare meat. And it can be nice to sometimes just have access to like a high quality protein powder. And there's other things. People talk about magnesium, right? And I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to recommend anything, but something as simple as that can throw off one of those other categories that we talked about, like sleep. We didn't really talk about recovery, but certain things, right, when they're supplemented, it makes sense for a person depending on, some of those other criteria that we talked about. And it's multidimensional. That means that depending on the person, it could be a lot of different things. But like I said, protein powder helps a lot of people, right? There was that magnesium thing. The other supplement is fiber, right? Because taking it all the way back to looking at the beginning, one of the reasons why people struggle with their diet, people struggle with eating a little bit less, because it's hard to overcome that sort of hunger feeling. And what I find is that when I eat very filling foods, right, sort of low calorie, high volume foods, helps me feel full. And fiber, like even like a psyllium husk fiber, something like that, what I notice is that when I take a little bit of that sort of at the end of my meal, helps my digestion, helps me move things along. But it really helps me feel full. It makes it a little bit easier for me to be able to put the brakes on and stop eating, which can be something that I have a proclivity for, which is overeating. And so that's the question. Like I said, we're all different, but it's worth looking at like, hey, are there any supplements that might be able to help me, or am I not being mindful in my application of them? And, having these conversations, I feel like it's worthwhile. If you've stayed with me this far, I thank you so much for watching the video. Hit me up in the comments. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.